Thanks again for joining us today. And now I'd like to introduce Janet Imobisa with Child and Family Services at the Department of Behavioral Health and Development Services to offer a welcome.
Thanks, Liz. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to part 2 of the Neurodivergent Youth Experience with Substance Use Training. As Liz stated, I'm Janet Imobisa. I'm the training coordinator for the Office of Child and Family Services, and I'll be your moderator for today. It is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today's session, Ms. Latasha Boone. Ms. Boone is a highly experienced and compassionate licensed professional counselor, boasting an impressive career in the human services field that spans 3 decades. Her dedication to her profession shines through her role as both a practitioner and client advocate. Ms. Boone's expertise as a trained clinical and trauma specialist allows her to understand and address the manifestations and impacts of traumatic social, community, and systemic stressors in individuals and families, and grapples with substance use disorders and mental illness. As a true champion for youth, Ms. Boone is deeply passionate about working with young individuals, recognizing the pivotal role they play in shaping the future of our communities. Her exploration of the dynamics of family functioning as a system emphasizes her commitment to holistic and comprehensive support for those navigating challenging circumstances and services continuum within the Commonwealth. Today, we have the honor of benefiting from her wealth of knowledge, experience, and passion. Her expertise will undoubtedly enrich our understanding of neurodivergent youth experience with substance use and strength-based approaches to utilize throughout prevention, treatment, and recovery to pave the way for more effective supports. So, with that being said, please join me in giving a warm virtual welcome to Ms. Latasha Boone. Ms. Boone, the virtual floor is now yours.
Good morning. Good morning. How is everyone doing this morning? You can take yourselves on mute. It's okay.
Doing fine. Yourself? Good.
Doing well. So I would love to kind of get a feel of the people that are in the room. So if you can go to the chat and identify for me what location you're from. And sometimes you may live in one area, but you may work in another area. I also would like to know what position and what population you work with. If you could definitely put that in the chat for me, I would love that. All right. All right, Fairfax, Community Service Board, Youth and Family, okay. Loudon, Therapist for Community Service Board, Suffolk, Virginia. Okay, I see an IOP program. All right, clinician working with children, adolescents, and families. All right, a youth OP, bilingual. What is your second language?
Spanish.
Okay. All right, Hanover CSB. All right. Hanover CSB, if you're familiar, I did my internship with New Life Journey with Donna Grau and Hank Matthews. So if you're familiar with them, say yes. All right, Henrico County Public Schools. Okay. So Karen, I would love to hear your perspective. I see you work with adults, autistic individuals, okay, women issues, children issues. RBHA, okay. Same Loudoun County. Okay. Oh, Miss Simmons, I am not love hearing Hanover Connection. Okay. Anyone else? All right. Anthem Homekeepers, ID, serious mental illness, substance use. Okay. Is that everyone? So I am just going to kind of start off with just for me, you know how we have our different roles of that we play within the community, as well as home, as well as the clients that we serve. And I do believe that we serve. I will say this, I am a play therapist first. That is what I love to do. I work preferably with adolescents. I do work with some children. And then I also work with the population reentry with adults, as well as juveniles and adolescents who deal with substance abuse. So with that being said, with me being a play therapist first, we're going to play a little bit this morning. So does anyone know? So I'm very interactive. So you may be quiet, but you won't be quiet long. Does anybody remember, and everybody can take, you have the option to take yourself off mute. Does anybody remember 100,000 Pyramid? Anybody believe? All right, Ms. Bailey, I see you raising your hand. No one else? You can put in the chat, or you can, no? Somebody is shaking their head no. So I'm really telling my age right now? Is that what I'm doing? I'm really telling my age? Janet had spoke earlier, Ms. Mbosha had spoke about, I've been probably doing this close to, oh my God, 30 years. I am really telling my age. So I have, I work closely with VCU, Capella University, and Walden University with interns. So I have my wonderful intern this morning that is going to tell you about, but I have to share my screen. So let's do that first. All right, so as you can tell, I have several windows up, as you can tell. So let me go here. Let's see if I can share what I want to share this morning. All right, so that is 2. I love it because it gives me the number. Basic, here we go. All right, share. All right, so Taylor, when you're ready, unmute yourself.
Good morning, everybody. Like she said, I'm one of the interns here at Who Counseling Services, and my name is Taylor Waddy. You're not really showing your age, Ms. Boone, because I still watch 100,000 Pyramid. But how we want to start this game, for those who said that they don't know what the game is kind of like an adjacent to Jeopardy. So there are 6 categories, and we're going to play it a little bit differently. Usually in the game, there's 2 people and you're going back and forth to figure out certain clues. But in this case, we designed it to be of, you can work in your groups, you can work individually, of like, what do you think the answer is within these 6 categories? Does that make sense? Seeing nods, yes is cool. Okay. I don't recall if you guys are already in pre-selected groups, or we can play individually. I'm unsure about that one.
So they're not in groups yet, not until the case studies at the end. So if someone, I'll let you take it from there.
Okay, well, perfect. So everybody is to each its own. We're gonna go through, and I'll have volunteers of who wants to pick their first category. And then Ms. Boone, you can put it in presenter view if that makes it easier. See, under slideshow in the top right corner. Perfect.
Do we just say it, or do we
you can go
chat it?
Oh, you will speak out the answers. I'm trying to figure out from Ms. Boone then what she would need to do. Is there a way to exit out of that presenter view? Probably hitting escape. I am not the tech savvy person then. Okay, perfect.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I got you.
Perfect.
All right.
Yes, so for anyone who wants to go first, you can pick any of these 6 categories. We got associated with substance abuse and misuse, risk factors. Okay, I see Miss Karen Bailey said neurodivergent conditions. Okay. So the question is, before you click on it, Ms. Boone, the question is, what are some conditions or diagnoses that are associated with neurodiversity? What do you think those diagnoses would be? And you can speak it out, you can put it in the chat.
Is this for me to answer or anyone?
Just for you to answer since you
Okay.
volunteered.
The topic. Well, autism spectrum disorder,
Mhm.
Attention deficit disorder with hyperactivity. Those are the typical
Mhm.
ones that I think of. Sometimes intellectual disability goes in there too.
Mhm. Okay. Anybody else want to throw in? Okay. Ms. Bernard, I got you for the second one. Thank you. Yeah, that's right. Ms. Bernard, you can click on it if they allow you to. Perfect. So yes, you were right. The
Whoa.
popular ones that we think of is autism spectrum disorder and attention deficit hyperactivity. There is also intellectual disabilities, a lot of dyslexia, anything with the dys. So you have dyscalculia, dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyspraxia, and Tourette's. So that's a whole plethora of different conditions and diagnoses within that. So I wish I had like little sound machines. Okay, next category. We have associated, Ms. Bernard, with associated with substance abuse and misuse. So with that question, it's asking you, what are words associated with substance abuse and misuse? So what do you think, what words come to mind?
Addiction, mental health, you said substance use and misuse. So I will guess NAAA sponsor.
Oh, it's tough because there's a whole lot of words that can go into it.
It's so much, hitting rock bottom.
It's okay. It's just to get you thinking, and like you thought of words that I didn't even think of. This where you can click on it. Yeah, like denial is one of them. Enabler, relapse. So you thought of a lot of other words as well, and that's kind of when we think of substance abuse. So much goes into it that we don't realize. But yeah, good job. I need to find like a little noise machines, noise makers to let people know. But thank you.
So there is a clapper in the playroom.
Oh, it is a clapper.
It is a clapper. Is it a clapper in the playroom? So that might be too much noise for everyone this morning because we're still trying to get it, but we probably should have thought about that, right?
I'll do my own clapper.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why we pick these categories is these are actually words in which our kids, right, may not know about. And educating them, this can appear to be big words, but you have to be very mindful of being able to explain to them in ways in which they will understand. The other piece is psychoeducation for the parent. So that is very, very important when working in that manner, to be able to have knowledge prior to you entering that therapy room. So let me know. Anybody else has raised their hand for another category?
Yes, we have Ms. Fernando who said risk factors for developing. And then
sorry. Cheated. Okay, hopefully anyone see that.
Hopefully. Ms. Fernando, what sort of risk factors do you think go into developing a substance use disorder?
I'm not muted. Okay, good. I was thinking history of family history of addictions, family history or the own history of any psychiatric diagnoses, or even not having been diagnosed, even though they have a primary psychiatric illness, but that they use substances to cope with things. The other thing is using drugs very early on in life, right? Late elementary school, early middle school, that can develop into a substance use disorder more often than trial and error later on. Then peer influences, and a lot of conflicts in the family or poor parent-child relationship are some of the things.
Some of those things I didn't even put. You could go ahead and click on them, Ms. Boone. But yeah, you're right. Family history plays a big factor. Your environment, if you're diagnosed with a neurodivergent condition, sensory, and I know who said it before. I know someone said before, like an intellectual disability sometimes goes into it as well. But yes, you're absolutely right. Thank you. I'm gonna clap for everybody.
Yeah. One of the things, definitely it appears that we cannot escape from, and that is trauma. We're talking about our big T's, our small T's. We're talking about complex trauma. And if you compile all of that together, and I mentioned, like you said, we didn't mention peer influences. I tell often when I am having family sessions, you are not your child's only influence. And that is very difficult for parents to understand. These are the values, morals that we teach in our home. These are our boundaries, these are our limits. And then once they leave your home, you are not your child's only influence, even just being at the bus stop. That is something that we rarely miss, is our own community and the influences that may have on the individuals that live in it. So thank you. All right, let's go back. All right, anyone else? All right, so hold on, trying to. All right, okay.
What was next? I'm also known for calling people out as well. So
Yeah, and I noticed no one has hit movies or TV shows about neurodivergent characters. They scared of that topic?
I can only
can
think
do
about
it.
TV
She
shows,
said
the older
yes.
TV show. I was thinking a monk. That was the first thing that came to my head
Okay.
with all of his tendencies.
Wow. Okay. Anyone else? Jill.
Rory from Gilmore Girls definitely has some coding.
Okay. All right.
I used to be famous.
Oh wow. Okay.
I can't remember the name
Abed
of the.
in
The Good Doctor.
Okay.
Abed in Community
Oh,
is
okay.
also on the spectrum.
Okay.
Atypical.
Atypical.
Okay.
Yeah, y'all got
All
good
right.
ones and some we didn't even have time to put, but we had a lot, plethora. You can go.
So,
for
all right. Wow.
Yeah, we're thinking Parenthood, Love on the Spectrum, which I know is a show on Netflix, and so is The Undateables. Everything's gonna be okay. I heard someone say Atypical and The Good Doctor. So yeah. And got me writing down some other ones that I can add to the list.
Okay. All right.
Can I ask a question?
Right. Yes.
So those individuals who are on the screen, were those individuals who portrayed individuals on the spectrum, or were the actors actually diagnosed with ASD?
So yes, so there was the son in Parenthood that was actually diagnosed with Asperger's. Good Doctor, I want to say it is evident, and there has been some storyline in regards to his social awkwardness, details, and Love on the Spectrum. That's more of a show on Netflix in which there are individuals that, yes, have been diagnosed and they're looking for love. So a lot of these are where someone in that show did identify as being on the spectrum. So yes, not all, but yes.
Thank you.
You are welcome. All right. We only have 2 more, and then we're gonna go into. All right, so what we have left is movies. No one wants to touch movies or occupations.
I'll do movies for fun.
Okay.
I feel very ignorant in that area. So other than Rain
Okay.
Man, like.
Mm-hmm. What else you got? You got Rain Man. What other movies do you think?
My mind just went completely blank.
Oh, it's okay. Anyone else want to help? Try to crack at it.
Forrest Gump.
Oh yes, that's a good one.
Forrest Gump.
Thinking like Finding Nemo because of Dory has like sharks.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Wow.
that's good.
Do you
That's a good one.
remember? Do you
Percy
remember?
Jackson.
Yeah, Percy Jackson.
Y'all gonna make me cry.
Yes.
Do you remember what difficulty Dory had in Finding Nemo?
I think it was short-term memory loss.
Yes,
You
sure.
got it. You got it. You got it. Okay.
Right.
All right. All right.
You can click on this. Of course, these aren't exhaustive lists. Like I try to think of popular ones to put in, but a lot of them, like yes, I can go and add. Someone put Temple. Miss
Oh
Smith,
yeah, Temple Grandin.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's there.
Yes.
Yeah, that is there.
You got The Accountant, Like Stars on Earth, Adam, Mozart and the Whale.
Yeah.
I remember watching these movies, but I cannot remember in my head what was their diagnosis.
Yeah. And if any of you want to have this information, we can definitely send you the information for each movie and the identified character. So definitely we can share our resources as well. And often what we're just talking about is sometimes you want to make things relatable. And it is very good to have those resources. So we only have one category left. And that no one has touched occupations that work with neurodivergent individuals. No one's going to touch that.
I will.
Okay.
ABA specialists.
Mhm.
Okay.
Anybody else want to help?
Occupational therapy, speech therapy, therapist, regular therapist, mental health therapist.
Behavioral health.
Behavioral health, yep. Same along lines of ABA therapy.
GI,
Mhm.
neurologies,
Yeah.
neurologists.
We're going to touch on that a little later. Yeah. All right.
Awesome. Yeah, you kind of covered most of
Yeah.
Yeah, psychologist, social.
You got it. Got it.
So
Yeah. I didn't put our
That was the
name on the
easiest
list.
one.
That was the easiest one? Okay. All right. So we're gonna lead right into what we're gonna cover today. So that takes me back here.
Yes, thank you so much for playing our little game. Kind of icebreaker, get us in the realm of neurodiversity and conditions. So thank you. I appreciate you guys.
Okay. I see someone did put LA Law as a TV show. I'm gonna have to check. Trisha, can you tell me which character on LA Law?
Yeah, I don't know if this is with it, but there was this character Benny who was developmentally delayed, and he was sort of the first. This was like I'm talking age myself in the 80s.
Okay.
I worked as a job coach at that point in time, and we had other law firms that were it seemed like that character on LA Law inspired businesses to look into, sort of the first efforts at inclusivity of.
So I am going to stop sharing, and then we're going to start with the presentation. Any questions that anyone has in regards to anything that we've I just thought it was a good way to kind of get us engaged, just to kind of see where everyone is with knowledge, and then we can talk about the experiences we all have had working with this population. So thank you all for participating. So I'm going to stop sharing. All right. So, all right. All right, so what we're going to cover today is identifying the emotional, cognitive, functional behavior, and physical characteristics of a neurodivergent youth, identifying the risk factors that increase the probability of developing a substance use disorder, and introduce some strength-based approaches when working with neurodivergent caregivers, teachers, and the community. So the overview is basically what is neurodiversity, how does it impact you struggling with substance use and misuse? Some of the challenges, what are some of the challenges facing neurodivergent youth? And what are some of the important aspects of neurodiversity? And why is understanding neurodivergent youth substance use and misuse important? So we are definitely going to cover all of that this morning. So if I can get, so I am going to get Elaine's help on the first poll.
All right, you want me to launch it?
Yes.
Does everybody see that?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Now you have to answer it. Excuse me. All right, it looks like everyone, Latasha, can you see it?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Okay, so you're welcome to end it and share when you want, or do you want me to?
Okay. I think we have maybe 2 more, 23, 2. Oh, everyone. Okay. Yes, you can share the results.
All right.
All right. All right, so I kind of just want to kind of get a feel in regards to just the knowledge in the room. So the question was, nearly 20% of our population have mental health needs. Is that a true statement? Majority of you answered, 92% answered true. Name a condition that identifies with neurodivergence. So definitely 90% answered. Was there anything in regards to something that you didn't already know? And then more than 20% of disabilities are visible. That is very false. Sometimes I think we all know that there are individuals that are walking around every day and which may have a disability, but you are unable to identify with that. I think it's very important that we don't assume. I think it's very important that when we talk about individuals or we're talking to them, that we kind of identify and kind of just explore. I always say I love open-ended questions. And sometimes people will let you know what is necessary within the first 5 to 10 minutes of just having a conversation with them. So I am going to, you can stop sharing. Thank you.
If it remains on your screen, just click away from it.
Got you. All right. And so everybody, I can tell I have some clinicians in the room. I can tell that I have people who may work individually day to day. You all were on point, so I'm loving to hear that. So let's kind of go into defining neurodiversity. I always kind of look at it as natural diversity of human minds is an umbrella term for individuals who have a mind or brain that diverges from what is typical. It can be acquired or genetic. It just means having a mind that functions differently to what is considered the norm, including learning, processing, and interpreting information. So if you were here on last week, this was some of the information that Dr. Mitchell Reed had definitely kind of discussed, but it's no different than race or ethnicity or gender or sexuality. I did want to share with you kind of a video with you in regards to the various different opinions in regards to identifying as a neurodivergent that I think is very helpful. I wanted to kind of share this diagram with you. Did you all know that there are a lot of individuals who identify, right, with these conditions, but are employed in the STEM field? So we're talking about science, technology, engineering, and math. Does anybody have any experience with working with individuals, even adults, in which they are working in this field? Does anybody have any experience with that? Okay, Ms. Bailey said, do you include TBI? I have seen some places included. I think that is probably, when I think of it, I think it's a magnitude of a TBI, in which if I would want to include it in that way, I know there is difficulty in memory and things like that. So I would say that is on a case-by-case basis is what I would say about traumatic brain injury. No one identifies with working with an individual who works in this field and is considered to be a neurodivergent. Okay.
I work with people who
Okay.
were in STEM field and were on the autism spectrum for sure.
Okay. What did you find that were some of their challenges?
One of the challenges that my client had most was the kind of day-to-day interactions with his peers. Thankfully, he had really good management because he was very good at what he did, but they had to sort of walk him through certain things at times.
Okay. Did he find in which, when you say they had to walk him through things at times, if he was in management, was it in regards to his communication with his subordinates and how to manage that or how to communicate with them?
Sorry, the management helped him walk through like some communication with his peers at work.
Okay. All right. When you look at this scale, if you notice, each condition has strengths. You notice that? Concentration, fine detail, processing, memory, sensory awareness when it comes to autism spectrum condition. Why is it so important to be able to identify their strengths? The reasons for that. And identifying strengths when you're working with individuals, neurodivergent conditions. Why do you think?
Well,
It's very, yeah.
It's one of my joys because I feel like so often the world wants them to focus on how they need to improve and how their deficits affect other people and how they can't get, etc. And so, but they all have strengths, and it's just fun to help them discover that.
Yeah. I also think it would be helpful in treatment planning. Definitely in treatment planning, which is vital. It's going to change over time. But I like what you said, Ms. Bailey, in regards to they focus a lot on what's different compared to what areas they can excel in or their thinking patterns. So definitely, I think that is a beautiful thing. I want to share with you any questions regarding this information. Okay. Some characteristics present challenges, I think is what the young, I'm gonna call you young man, said. That's how you can tell my age. In traditional work or educational settings, possess unique strengths that can improve productivity, quality, innovation, and engagement. So one of the things as well is 1 in 5 people have a learning or thinking difference like ADHD or dyslexia. They are misunderstood and undiagnosed, and differences are sometimes viewed as a weakness or behavior issue, which is related to what Ms. Bailey stated. For the African American children with learning disabilities, the stigma is amplified and can lead to delayed identification of the source of a child's struggle. So one of the fasting rates that is happening amongst African American youth is an increasing suicide death rate when it comes to addressing some of the issues and concerns that they may have in this community. So definitely, culturally, we are supposed to take that into consideration when we are working with our families. So please don't exclude this from your treatment planning. So one of the other things I want to kind of talk about is the video I was making reference to, because there are some individuals who do not want to be identified as neurodivergent. And there are advocates in which they want to ensure, even with that individuals' needs are being met. So we're gonna let me know. Yeah.
The sound isn't sharing.
Make sure you click share sound in the share screen. I would stop it and go back out.
Gotcha.
Oh, because you're doing it directly from the presentation.
Okay. And you showed me this on yesterday.
Down where it says more. More.
All right. And let me know, Elaine.
Neurodiversity, noun, is the concept that there is natural variation in the human brain that leads to differences in how we think and behave. It's short for neurological diversity. Neurodiversity. The term was first coined in the 1990s by a sociologist named Judy Singer, who argues that neurological differences, like autism, are just that, neurological differences. In other words, different brains work differently. Neurodiversity exists, just like diversity exists in ethnicity, gender, and sexual orientation. Those of us with ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, Tourette's, those who are neurotypical, and those who are autistic all have brains that are hardwired to work and learn differently. And even brains within each group are wired differently and have a spectrum of abilities. And while we can sometimes learn to mask those differences are still going to exist. And trying to pretend they don't, or being told that they shouldn't, often comes at a high cost to our sense of self and our mental and physical well-being, often putting our brain's operating system at higher risk for the mental health equivalent of malware, such as anxiety or depression, which is why the neurodiversity movement exists. The neurodiversity movement is a social movement historically led by autistic self-advocates and other neurodivergent activists, advocating for the acceptance of the autism spectrum as reflecting natural variations in the human brain rather than a disease that needs to be cured. This movement has grown within the autism community as well as to other neurodivergent folks. Hi. I have ADHD. While neurodiversity advocates might disagree on some things, and I obviously can't speak for everyone, there are a few key assumptions within the neurodiversity paradigm. 1, neurodiversity exists. Different brains work differently and have distinct strengths and weaknesses. 2, neurodiversity is valuable. Differences in how our brains work allow us to come at things from different perspectives, have vastly different skill sets, and accomplish more than we could if everyone's brain worked the same way. 3, the potentially disabling challenges that those of us who are neurodivergent face aren't necessarily inherent to our brain's differences, but often a result of the social and physical environments neurominorities exist within, which is highlighted perfectly in a blog post about the concerning condition called neurotypicality, written from an autistic perspective. The blog, which is satire, presents a world in which neurotypical brains are the neurominorities and discusses how odd those brains would seem and the challenges they would face in an autistic world. A personal example, I'm very nearsighted. If I didn't live in a society that provided glasses and contacts, I would be disabled. The neurodiversity movement is a bit controversial in that it upends some of how we've thought about these things for a really long time. But most of the criticisms of the neurodiversity movement seem to come from misunderstandings of what it actually is. A lot of critics of the neurodiversity movement argue that viewing autism as just a natural variation implies that autistic people don't need any support. But in response to this criticism, one autism researcher and advocate explains it well. Neurodiversity advocates generally consider autism to be both a natural variation and a disability. Advocates therefore concurrently currently campaign for acceptance and respect for autistic people as valuable members of society, and also fight for appropriate support and services to meet the needs of the autistic community. And the same is true of most ADHD advocates. We recognize that life is hard for us, and there are times where it would be easier to not have ADHD. But a lot of what we struggle with is because of environmental and social factors, and can be mitigated through creating social and physical environments that account for and accommodate neurodiversity. That doesn't mean we reject medical treatment. As a neurodiversity advocate with ADHD, I'm working toward a world that recognizes, appreciates, and accommodates neurodiversity. I also have a therapist and take meds. Acceptance of my brain's differences and support for the challenges I face are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they both work toward the same goal, a better quality of life. As I've mentioned a couple of times on this channel, I am writing a book this year, which I have never done before, and so I started taking a course on Wondrium to learn how to do it. Wondrium is the rebrand of the Great Courses Plus, and it's designed for curious brains. Whenever I want to learn something in depth, I check there first, because they have a ton of courses, and anything I want to watch is included in my subscription. How-tos, tutorials, documentaries. Wondrium is where you can find the answer to pretty much everything you've ever wondered about, and they're constantly adding new stuff. I've been taking this one specific to writing creative nonfiction, which is what my book is going to be. Part memoir, part how-to. I've already learned a lot of stuff that has saved me time and made my writing better. The info in the courses often blows my mind, but the latest thing I'm kind of obsessed with is I found out I can watch it on my Apple TV, which is hooked up to my new projector. So now it feels like I'm actually in the classroom, which is super cool. Life-size professors. If you don't have a projector, don't worry. You can also watch it on your phone, tablet, computer, in it.
All right. Any perspective on that video? I hear you shaking your head, Miss Bailey.
I like her. I've used her with my clients. I think that she has a great way of articulating some of the basic components of where the issues are, that, and what I feel like I'm working with not only helping the clients, but the families and just the world around me, saying it dramatically, but really recognize that why do we always see it like one way, that their deficit is one way, when is it always a deficit, or is it because they always have to achieve what we think of as normal? But most of us who are not neurodiverse still aren't necessarily, we don't all fit in one way. That's kind of boring. And so I think I like the way she presented it in that way.
Okay. One of the things I often think about is a lot of the rules that comes with society and social interaction is based on what we believe to be normal. And I often think I had a young lady that I was working with, and her mother brought her in. She had not been diagnosed, and her mother, she didn't want to go to homecoming. And mom thought that was something that was very pivotal in your life that you don't want to ever miss. Definitely, we went through the process of having an evaluation, and she was diagnosed with on the autism spectrum. But often I think about normal individuals don't want to go to their homecoming. And that was difficult to explain to because she wanted to associate it with, I don't care, she needs to go. And that was very difficult, where I do not believe it was based on what mom termed to be her diagnosis, but that she just had not, even in the past, been in big gatherings. So I think we have to be able to communicate that and educate our parents that it is not just their condition, but more of socially what they do not want to participate in. And I think the biggest thing that you will find when you get to your case studies is advocacy. And oftentimes it's not just with the community or resources you are exploring, it is advocacy for your client. And I think that is very important to let them know that they have some support. So that is often, I believe, what she was talking about is these variations are individually, I think, need to be approached in that way. Go ahead, Ms. Bailey.
I have particularly found this to be an issue with my female adult clients, because as they describe their families and their culture, it's like we've had these conversations of like family gatherings at the holidays, or, you know, somebody's coming into town, which they're not necessarily opposed to, but I'm trying to help them to advocate for themselves, to say, you need to be able to take breaks. It's like you can be involved, but you need to, you know, your family needs to know this. And particularly with their mothers, it was like, you know, stop using your autism as an excuse, which, you know, like I have to have some self-control to like, but I encourage them. But I remember one time we were having a conversation. I have a little group of these ladies, and I just said, wait a minute, this is a social issue for women. Because I see that the guys are often they have other issues, but when it comes to the social piece, we just like, I've known all kinds of guys, not just autistic men, but also men in general who are just more quiet, and they get oh, Johnny's in the room, he's in his bedroom, we know he's here, he might say hey, and nobody has a problem with that. But then, you know, so it's something I've just been processing more this year, is helping, you know, young ladies to advocate and say, I have needs, and I'm not interested in burnout just because, you know, but that's hard to do with your family. Family is the hardest to deal with. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Yeah, you are welcome. You're welcome. Anyone else in regards to their assessment of the video?
I thought it was interesting the way
Actual classroom probably don't do that. It would.
I thought it was
I'm sorry, go ahead.
How she was drawing out that it's both a natural difference, but that doesn't mean that it has to be, that it's meant to be ignored or just sort of lumped in with everyone else. There actually are things that need to be done to provide extra resources.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I like it's almost like that natural process of just, I think, just developing as an adolescent, a young adult, that I think in different phases of our lives, when we're considered, I'm gonna keep saying normal, it's okay for us to shift and change. And but when we're looking at this community, it's viewed as a challenge. And I do not believe that is always the case. It's different when you have sensory, right? It's different when you have someone who has repetitive behavior. That's something totally different. But I think as we're talking about the challenges, I believe is just, I like natural. And I think we are able to work with our that population better. And I struggle with that population. Individuals better in a way when we identify just exactly what they need. So thank you for that. So I am going to get out of this video. Out of that. And as I'm navigating to the next page.
Probably make your actual teacher sad. Wondrium is such a
Click on the word video presentation. It should move you to the next slide. The words video presentation should move you to the next slide.
I'm looking.
At the very top.
Right at the top.
Yeah, video presentation, the blue words. If you click there, I believe that's a part of the presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry, it wasn't.
This episode about neurodiversity.
Okay. I'm sorry, y'all. My pictures were at the very top, and I think I need to move them at the bottom to the side so I can't see. So we're going to now talk about the physical characteristics, emotional, cognitive, and behavioral and functional characteristics of neurodivergent individuals. So when I'm talking about physical, okay, well, we're going to talk about emotional first. Heightened empathy and emotional intensity possess a special ability for empathy that enables them to perceive and understand the emotions of others around them. Are there other, so when I say emotional, what do you believe additional I may be talking about when it comes to emotions? So if I was to say someone has intense emotions, what would that look like?
Loud or
Mhm.
acute?
Mhm. I may definitely express myself emotionally and maybe very loud in my environment. I definitely may express myself emotionally when I'm able to recognize that you are in distress. So at that moment in time, definitely it comes from us being able to understand what you are seeing, and if it does require some intervention. Okay. So next we're going to talk about the cognitive, unique thought processes, variations, and how the senses are processed and subtle emotional differences. What may I be talking about when it comes to cognitive characteristics?
A little bit more concrete, less abstract, more linear.
Mm-hmm.
Processing speed.
You got it. Also, I may have, even in this part, there may be some strengths when it comes to how I'm processing information. Right. Especially as visual and auditory. So I may have that perfect vision. Or auditory, I may have a tendency where I'm able to kind of be the first one to respond because I am definitely have expand and increase auditory functioning. What about executive functioning? What could that mean?
I was about to say that because I feel like sometimes it can be their ability to really process a question. And that's actually what I work with a lot of my clients with, of just when they hear something, the understanding of central coherence and their ability to process something that and how they can answer it in a way that most people do, where that can get them stuck to in that way. But it also can make them very focused when they are really interested in something. They can kind of keep that gets them excited, and it can their energy goes there.
Now, this also this individual may have trouble with time management, organization. And I think you're making reference to the way that they, when you say process problem solving, may be very difficult for them. But I like the detail oriented. So, and what about creativity? Some are very creative. Oftentimes we go to the challenges, but I also think it's strengths in these areas as well. Next, we're going to talk about functional. Embraces differences in brain function and behavior, has national manifestation of humanity's variety, rather than viewing them as wrong or problematic. What do you think I'm making reference to when I say functional characteristics? They may have difficulty with self-regulating when it comes to functional. What would that look like? Someone who's having difficulty with self-regulation.
Difficulty concentrating or focusing on a task.
May have anger episodes, right? Definitely could be something in regards to when they are experiencing frustration, can easily walk out of the room, not being able to self-regulate. I did eventually have, I think in one of the case studies, an individual in which was diagnosed later in adolescence, but she had a special blanket that she had in elementary, but that blanket also accompanied her to middle school and high school. Now, there was, at that point in time, she did not disclose, of course, to others that she had that blanket in her book bag, but oftentimes it would have to be close in proximity to her. Because she would definitely have difficulty with regulating in the classroom, but that was comfort to her. So just be mindful of those things. Often you would think someone in middle school and high school, let's help them not to be attached. But often if that is the only challenge or what some would consider a barrier, I think it's very important for her to be connected in that way. So that's how. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It could also be like stemming or the need to move within like a space. So it doesn't have to be stemming that's as obvious as like me flapping my hands, but it could be that I have an intolerance to sit very long, and I might need to move around to think clearly or to that kind of thing, which most of us, don't do well sitting forever, but we have more tolerance to sit than they typically do.
Yeah. Okay. Next one is behavior, the ability to stay focused on a topic or activity of interest for long periods of time outside the box. What do you think I mean by that? Outside the box. So in this particular area, you will have a tendency to see repetitive behaviors. Sometimes that can look in so many different ways. Someone who has to count the items on their desk, it can only be but so many items, right? Or someone who definitely has to count and pace back and forth before they would sit down. So just be kind of mindful as you're working, whether that's with the school or just them being in the community, them being in spaces in which people, they're less exposed for individuals to look at them in a negative way. Or sometimes I think being in environments, kids and peers are just some very challenging individuals developmentally in regards to how they interact with what they see as different. So just kind of being mindful of that. They may need a smaller classroom setting, which can be very difficult in some overcrowding of schools, where you have a high incidence of kids who have behavior concerns. So just kind of keep that in mind. And our last one is physical, social communication difficulties such as trouble making eye contact while talking, or not reading body language, speech, and language challenges such as stuttering and repetition. So are there any other physical characteristics that may come into play with this population?
Isn't hypermotility a pretty common co-occurring physical thing?
Mm-hmm. Also, unusual gait or posture. It's something different. So when you think of, I often think of someone blocking out loud noises or seeking intense sensory input, like spinning or jumping. Unusual facial or body movement. So now we're talking about the jerking, or just increased eye blinking. Can anyone think of anything else?
I would add interoception difficulties to the list, because a lot of folks don't get the internal body cues for like using the restroom or eating or sleeping, or like their body just doesn't tell them those things. And so it becomes a crisis of like, oh my God, now I'm so hungry that I'm throwing desks because I haven't eaten in 24 hours because I forgot to eat because I didn't feel hungry until it was an emergency.
Yeah. I'm thinking one of the case studies, I believe in the one that I shared, There is one young lady where she falls asleep in the corner of her room and becomes very dysregulated when she is attempted to move. Someone is attempting to move her. I've dealt with a lot of individuals who've had the physical characteristics, right, of a neurodivergent condition. So just definitely keeping that in mind when it comes to recognizing what you see, what you hear, and even what you perceive to be a symptom of. And we all know that definitely when working with individuals, making that referral for them to be assessed. Because often a lot of this can look like the norm that, for the parents that we work with. So that covers our characteristics. Let's see where we're going to next, making sure I am still on. Okay. So we are going to talk about the risk factors that increase the probability of developing a substance use disorder. All right. So I want to talk about the link before we get to that between neurodiversity and addiction. A neurodivergent person may struggle with executive functioning, which can make it harder to resist impulsive behaviors or make long-term plans. I often think of my individuals diagnosed with ADHD. This can contribute to addiction as you are more likely to engage in activities that provide short-term pleasure but have long-term negative consequences. Which we talked about earlier in our 100,000 pyramid game. Some of those common neurodivergent conditions is autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, Tourette syndrome, obsessive compulsive disorder. So I wanted to share, here we go with with another video. Hopefully I can make this transition a lot better than the last one. So I wanted to kind of play for you this video of a young man talking about his journey from, he had been in, had never been in a school more than 5 years besides elementary. So I wanted to kind of give you an opportunity to kind of hear from him, and then we'll talk about it afterwards. Let me make sure more.
Trying to come up with a title for the talk, and I was like, how can I do this so that everything I say is a surprise? And I realized I couldn't. So I have a very, a title that gives you a lot about me, and you're going to end up hearing a lot more by the end of it. So I chose some quotes, and you'll see those, and I'm not going to read them to you, but I just want to, I'm going to address this one specifically. I like the how far back must you go to discover the beginning of the trouble? Because I can kind of go back to a time when I was not so nervous as an individual and anxious, and and I think that time, my parents will tell you, was October 27th, 1999, the day of my birth. That was the last moment I wasn't anxious. I was like trying to come up with a title for the talk, and I was like, how can I do this so that everything I say is a surprise? Then I realized I couldn't. So I have a very, a title that gives you a lot about me, and you're going to end up hearing a lot more by the end of it. So I chose some quotes, and you'll see those, and I'm not going to read them to you, but I just want to, I'm going to address this one specifically. I like the how far back must you go to discover the beginning of the trouble? Because I can kind of go back to a time when I was not so nervous as an individual and anxious, and and I think that time, my parents will tell you, was October 27th, 1999, the day of my birth. That was the last moment I wasn't anxious. So that was also the first moment that I was on the spectrum, something I like to point out. I wasn't on the spectrum when I was diagnosed when I was 8. I was on the spectrum when I was born on October 27, 1999. So I was a relatively happy child, you know, as happy as I could be. And I started school I started school a little bit younger because I'm born in October, so a little bit younger. But I was kind of a little bit ahead of my classmates, which everyone noticed, and my parents took notice too, but the school didn't want to take notice too. And I finished that school, I finished my first school in kindergarten and had to switch schools because my classmates didn't like me. And it kind of became this pattern where I went, the maximum time I ever spent at a school was 5 years, and that was 1st through 5th grade. And I switched again in 6th grade, I switched to 7th, I switched after 9th, I switched after 11th, and now I'm in college, and I'm trying not to switch again. But I remember I finished up 5th grade, and I was having a really hard time. I was really discovering the depths of how anxious I could get. And we went on a trip to Disney, and I ended up, I'm gluten-free, and I ended up eating gluten, and I had a reaction. And my parents said, like, well, you know, I used to have this rule that was like, I can't use my computer, you know, whatever I bring on my trip, I can't use my screen more than a half an hour a day. And it was something apparently I set up for myself. That wasn't my parents. I loved the rules. And so I was using it, and I was feeling better, and that was great. And then I got home, and I was starting in a new school, and I was really nervous because there were all these kids I didn't know, and they had all known each other since kindergarten. And so I kept using my computer when I got home, and it made me feel better. And I didn't really think of it that much in a way, like it seemed very normal, like everyone was just using a computer or, you know, using their DS. And so I was like, okay, I'm doing good. And I got anxiety medication in me, and then I finished up in 6th grade. I switched schools again, and I went to an all-boys male school, which with my personality, it did not mesh well. So I'm at this all-boys school. I get to 9th grade, and I actually got to the 2nd day of 10th grade. I say 9th grade because it's a lot simpler. I got to the 2nd day of 10th grade, and the counselor that was assigned to me through the state or through the county said, you're not going back to classes. You're not going back to the school. You're leaving now, and you're not going back. And then I went to my therapist, and she said, Dylan, you cannot go back into that school. Your mental health has just deteriorated. I was like, okay, I'm very happy. It's time to start something new. So I went to online school, which was really cool for a while. But then I found that I was on my computer every single day, and I woke up at 7 in the morning to start class work at 8, and I was putting away my work at 9, and every single day I was in front of my screen doing work all the time. And I still thought it was fine, like that's normal, like people want to do schoolwork, and I didn't realize that wasn't normal because people don't want to do schoolwork, but I wanted to do schoolwork. So then I get to 11th grade, and I was tired. 2 years I was online schooled, and I was really tired of sitting alone in my bedroom every single day. So I was switching to a new school. It was actually, I'd done my tax talk. They invited me to go. I was really excited. And then I, as a child has to do at some point, got my wisdom teeth out. So I was very anxious. I went into the doctor's office. They explained everything to me 7 times. They brought me in. They numbed my arms. They put the needle in me. I remember my vision splitting in 2. And then I woke up, and I was happy, and I slept for 3 hours. And then I did, 12 English assignments and got 100 on all of them in a day. And then at the end of a day and a half, I was still pretty happy, and I fell asleep. And then the next day I woke up. I did not feel well. I was very nauseous. I was sweaty, clammy, shaking. And I was like, why? I was like, it's all gone away. I was so happy. What happened? What happened? And so, we took a look at the sheet stuff. And when they put you under with IV anesthetic, they give you the cocktail of the different drugs. One of the drugs that they happened to give me was fentanyl. And I reacted very well to it. And then I didn't react so well to it. And then there was a month of me going, well, the doctor put a prescription for Vicodin in at the pharmacy, and that'll make me feel happy. And I just wanted to feel happy. And I was switching schools again, and I was actually sitting the other day, and I was like, I was switching schools, and I was never kind of dealing with my problem. And so every single time that I was switching these schools, every single time that I would get anxious, I would find something new to just distract myself. It was all about functioning. It was moving forward. It was how do I move forward and complete my next task, because that's all that matters. That's all that mattered to me. And so when I got to 12th grade, I was, I was recovered. It had been, I had a month before I had to go back into school. And I had a tough time. I don't always get along with my classmates. So, every once in a while, it was like maybe like something would be nice to just kind of comment. And I was like, I can take my anti-anxiety medication. That works okay. It works pretty well, and I can use my tools. And I got off to college, and college is a different situation. College is a place where all of these kids come, and for the first time, they're free, and they can go and do what they want. And I kind of realized that I couldn't very early on because I like the rules, and so I wasn't going and doing whatever I wanted. But I started to meet people, and I realized that they were going out and doing all these things that they wanted to do. And I was like, okay. And I was like, classes are stressing me out. It'd be really nice if I could do that too. And it just so happened that on my birthday, I was completely sober, and I just want to make that clear because I was with two of my friends for my birthday. We were watching a movie. I have a cough, so I used my inhaler. I spit out the water because that's what you do afterwards, and I lifted my head into a door and sliced my head open a little bit. So hospital emergency room visit later, and they're like, how bad's the pain? And the first thought in my head was, well, the pain is, it's bad. I can handle it, but I'm really stressed. Like I tell them a little bit higher, maybe they give me something. And I was like, I said to the doctor, I went, they said, what are you allergic to? And I said, I'm allergic to codeine, I'm allergic to gluten, I have my seasonal allergies, you can't give me narcotics. It was like the last substantive thought that I had in my head before I just kind of went through the rest of the process. And I realized I'm an addict. Like I need something, I constantly need something to calm myself down. And so I called my parents. I was like, Mom, Dad, I think, I know that we kind of discussed this. I think that there's something bigger, like there might be something worse. So it was the first time I kind of admitted it myself, and it was really scary. Like that is a scary idea. That is a scary thing to say. But it was also really freeing because I was able to say, to a couple people, 9 people, 12 people was what it was at. Now it's probably at like 150. And once the video comes out, everyone can just look it up. So lots of people now know that about me. So it's really exciting and it's really scary. And in some way, like I wanted to go and tell people about it. And now I am, but I knew a while ago. And I was ashamed. Like that's what came up for me. Like anytime that I would have the thought in my head, I was like, I can't tell people because this is bad. This is not me. Like this is not who I am. This is a different Dylan. This Dylan is bad. And so I kind of was like, well, where do I go? And I can't go to a group. I can't sit in front of people. I'm on the spectrum. One, I'm anxious, and 2, I don't really know how to communicate really well in this group of people who are very different than me. I don't really know their names. I don't know them. The first rule I gave everyone when they told me I had anxiety was I will never do a group, and I still follow it today. So, all I can do is go to a therapist, which is good, but it doesn't solve everything because, you have to find, it's about specialization, and it's about what they know, and it's about all of that. And so, it's frustrating. I can't necessarily go and tell people about it because of that. And now I'm up here and I'm telling you about it. So for me, being at college, it's just a lot of people go out on the weekends and drink. Like, that's the thing. Like, and people say to me, like, this is how I relax, Dylan. This is how I feel better about my day. And I look at them and I go, I really wish I could feel better about my day too. And I don't tell them. And so it's this fear that's in the back of my head at all times. It's like, when does it happen? When does someone offer me something and I don't have that? I've had it twice in my life where I said no, and I had twice in my life where I keep doing it. Because I can tell you, I'm still constantly working and I'm still constantly on my computer. So when is the time that I don't say no, and then how do I stop it again? So it's really scary. I don't know. It's totally unknown to me. And that's the problem. Life is really long. And I'm 18. Guessing most of you in this room are going, wow, he's young. He is a whippersnapper, which is actually something I would say. So, you know, it seems like my life hasn't been super long. But I mean, I was born, and when you're diagnosed at 7 on the spectrum, like, you're in the middle, late range of diagnosis. So they're like, we want to get you to where you need to be right now. Like, you have to learn the social skills right now. And then people will understand you, they will like you, you will be able to do this, your life will be great. And it's not, because the day before, you know, a week before I went off to college, I said to my therapist, I was like, I've gone to 6 schools, how do I know 7's going to work? And she was like, Dylan, I don't really think that this, like, the training is doing that much for you. Like, you can't learn more when everyone else around you can't give you the rest of, you know, when you're offering 75%, they're only offering 25%, of course it's going to be really stressful. The problem is, if they don't know how to offer 50% and you do, then you're always going to have this disconnect. And so, you know, I really do have this disconnect with people. I don't quite understand it. And I got all this training, and I walked through one fire. I really did. I learned, I got beaten up, I got multiple concussions. That's what happens when you play football without helmets at an all-boys school. You know, I did. I walked through one fire, and I walked through a second one when I realized that I was coping through these very unhealthy means. And then I realized that I have to walk through another one in the way that I learned all of these skills, and now I have to unlearn them. I have to unlearn all of these skills because they're not, these are the things that in between the schools, that's what they were teaching me. They were saying, Dylan, if you did this, they'll like you more. And it doesn't matter, because they won't like me more because I learned some skill. Instead, it just makes me really dislike myself more. And so, you know, when I go back to school, there'll be a lot of kids who say to me, Dylan, it's so amazing. You did another TED Talk. And I have people say, you know, Dylan, it's amazing. You wrote a book. Dylan, it's amazing. You did a TED Talk before. Dylan, you know, you do all this stuff. It's amazing. You must be so happy. I'm not. I'm really not. I'm not a happy person, because it's not helping. It's not, you know, there's nothing about that really works. There's no amount of achievement that makes people like you, and there's no amount of achievement for me in the way that I'm not achieving because I want to help people, but that's not my main reason, and it's not always clear to me. So, you know, I get up here and I talk to you guys, and, like, yes, I want to help people on the spectrum who are suffering through similar things. But in all reality, and I realized this probably about a week ago, I'm doing this because I want people to stop being mean to me, but it's not the people right now who are being mean to me. I want the people from 5 years ago to be nice to me 5 years ago. But that's not how it works. I can't do that. I can't make them like me 5 years ago because I'm in now and I'm not back then. But it's really hard because I can't, like, Dylan up here talking to you guys is a lot different than Dylan in a situation talking to people where someone says something and I just look in the back of the room and I start remembering something, and then I need to go and achieve something so that everyone will look up to me, but it's not working because that's not what I want. I just want everyone to stop. I want everyone from 5, 10, any number of years ago to just stop hitting me, and it doesn't work. And so being on my computer all the time doesn't work. Being on, doing work all the time doesn't work. Using fentanyl worked in a way, but it's not healthy. Like, that's not the way to go with life. That is not what I want. That's not who I wanted to be. It's not what I imagined for myself. I had said something about normal in my last talk. Like, we have this idea of normal. And we do. And I think that the problem is that normal isn't good. Normal is very bad. Normal is a very bad concept because you'll never be normal. No one in this room will be normal. I don't care if you're on the spectrum. I don't care if you're a neurotypical, which is what we call you if you didn't know that. So, you know, I can't I can't be normal, you can't be normal. Everyone trying to get to normal isn't making things better. So I mean, I like to leave people with one thought, and my one thought for you is normal is bad. Just be weird. Just be weird. Your brain, all of our brains work differently. Just be weird.
What are your thoughts? I liked how, can you all hear me? I liked how his last quote was, "What matters the most is how well you walk through the fire." And that was, to me, very pivotal in explaining just where he is currently now. Any thoughts about Dylan at all? I saw some smiles because he definitely included some humor in there. I thought that definitely probably is just who he is all the time. Any thoughts?
It made me a bit sad to hear how his struggle and that really, but his self-reflection of like you're all weird, we're all weird together, just embrace your weirdness is like the best advice for everybody. And stop, and also just the other part would be, and stop trying to make everybody else like normal, you know, feel like that they're going to achieve if they are normal, but just working with what and accepting themselves. Because it's sad that he's 18 and he's already feeling burnout because he's trying to be something, but he's also has a lot of wisdom to recognize that what I really trying to achieve is something impossible, because I can't make the kids who were bullying me a while back really, I can't make them like go back in time and say, you know what, you really are a good person and you're, you know, you're pretty cool. You know, we can't, and that's typically that's often what the part of therapy that kind of help people recognize that. And
sorry, I just jumped right in. I apologize.
No, go ahead.
I find I kind of agree a lot there with what Karen said, especially in terms of like his age and his ability to see so clearly, and really compartmentalize all that he has experienced and how it has affected him. But like I think that this is just like him, so much of what he is right in front of you, and the authenticity, the genuineness in which he is speaking, there's nothing in a sense that seems to be kind of uncovered. Is very raw in front of you, and so it evokes a very like emotional response to see the video as well. But it's something I think about when I've with my own clients, and myself having ADHD and working with teenage clients, especially males, up until those males in their mid-30s, whatnot. Where he's at right now is just like where you strive, like you hope to see these individuals when they hit their mid-20s and whatnot. But it's like when you're talking to them at 16, you're talking to them at 17, it's just like what you know now, like, or what you're experiencing now, and what you will understand about it later, like he has right now, and it's such a gift.
Yeah, I was just hoping that his peer group saw him and, you know, this TED Talk to say, I want to get to where he is, right? Even as adults, quote, normal, neurotypical, just the wealth of his experience at so young of an age, which kind of takes me back to often people see neurodivergent individuals as deficits in regards to how they communicate. And I'm just saying, like, I like what you said, emotionally, there is some connection to this. Like, I want to have this attitude about life and not strive so much to be the norm and just be individually who you are. So when I found this, I can identify, I felt emotionally connected as well, to the point I'm going to try and go find his book and his other TED Talks, because I think definitely I do a social skills group, and definitely I think they would benefit from this as well. So Anything else? Anyone, anything else? We're gonna go to a break shortly. Can anybody think of anything else about this?
All right. Well, we hope you all had a refreshingly quick break. We are happy to jump right back into session and discussion and some really awesome hands-on activities with Ms. Boone. So I will yield the floor to you.
All right. So I have another poll that I want to share. All right, and if you could answer this poll, I would greatly appreciate it.
We're looking for just a few more people to put their answers in. All right, Latasha, you're at 78%, and it doesn't look like that's going to get any higher.
I got you. I think we're still on our break. That's all. That's all. All right. So basically, neurodiverse individuals may face challenges with executive functioning, which can affect their ability to plan, prioritize, and organize their work. So definitely 100%. Okay, true. All right, got some knowledgeable people in the room. I guess so. You all are experts, right? Next one is neurodivergent is a medical term that describes people whose brains develop or work differently for some reason. The key word here was medical term. That is the key word. It is not recognized in the medical field. This started off as I don't want to call it a campaign, but it became very in the 90s and just has built some momentum over time. If we're looking at it, it's a natural variation just of how we develop and learn differently. To me, that is the greatest thing that I love about neurodiversity is the way that it captures that it can be natural. So let's just keep that in mind. I'm going to stop sharing the poll. Any questions regarding the poll? All right, so we're going to proceed. Now we're going to cover our risk factors. Well, what are the challenges of neurodiversity? Difficulty paying attention, following instructions, and completing tasks. Easily distracted, impulsivity, which we kind of talked about already. Both individuals with some form of autism and ADHD are more likely to report that they first turn to addictive substances in an effort to self-medicate. And then executive functioning challenges. Neurodiverse individuals may face challenges, once again, with executive functioning, which can affect their ability to plan, prioritize, and organize their work. Any other challenges, excuse me, that we can think of when it comes to neurodivergent individuals? I often think of resources, sometimes just, excuse me, late diagnosis. I think early intervention is always the best, but I think what I share with you is, especially in the African-American community with their youth, sometimes there is a delay in diagnosing. So that could be a challenge as well, not having early intervention that can put some of those resources in place. So let's talk about, I mean, it is I don't consider trauma to be a buzzword, but it's actually it's a true statement. I work a lot with individuals in which are exposed to violence in their community, that face a lot. And if you're in your community and it happens, violence happens on a daily basis, we're now talking about complex trauma. But risk factors: trauma, serious accidents, physical, sexual assault, abuse, including childhood or domestic abuse, exposure to traumatic events at work, serious health problems such as being admitted to intensive care. You will find there is distrust of medical professionals in different ethnicities, and they may be late in addressing health problems. And when I think of that being a risk factor, is failing to get medical health, can definitely be a risk factor. When we're talking about sensory, being understimulated or institutionalized during crucial periods of neurological development. One individual that I've worked with in the past, one of her goals was not to have a hospitalization for at least 60 days. She had been hospitalized, 15 years old, at least once, at least every 30, 45 days. And when you think of that as being a goal, that could have been alarming to some, but that's one that she wanted to achieve along with her mother. Being exposed to drugs while in utero. At one point in time, I worked for Richmond City Department of Social Services and Child Protective Services. And at that time, in the early 2000s, we actually received neglect or abuse investigations for babies that had been born substance exposed. To some point, depending on circumstance, they were put into foster care, and other things we did a protective order just to kind of mandate treatment. Drug court programs were real prevalent then. So that was just, I felt like was a resource. And then I don't know if can anyone share if they work with that population in which they were working with pregnant mothers, and after they had their children being substance exposed. Does anybody have any experience with that? Okay, go ahead, Ms. Bailey. Tell me what were some of the challenges, not just for the parent, but also for the child.
Well, I think that initially, because I was pretty new in the field, but it was more like trying to make the child, just be soothed. I think the issue of soothing was the biggest issue. And because they weren't so easily soothed, it was an issue of then, there was no medication that was going to solve it, because it was not ADHD as a lot of times they were being diagnosed, but it was really because of the exposure and just and helping the parents to have tolerance, which typically the reason there was a problem to begin with was because which gave them, they didn't have their own, they didn't know how to nurture. And that, I feel like that was probably the biggest issue. It's very, very sad to see sometimes those, but often just having to look at it a different way, as opposed to being like, you're being a good boy or a bad boy kind of thing, which I feel like that's what's typical. And it's also what's typical in a family where there has been abuse or there's generational drug abuse and that sort of thing. That's not unusual to not know what, oh, you're crying like that because you don't know how to handle let me give you some, you might need some more swaddling or something. That's not how people who struggle with drug addiction have their own story as to why.
Yeah. I remember that was probably so I have 4 children of my own. I thought I was very good at swaddling them and putting them in their blankets. I became an expert working with that population. I was like, oh, okay, I've never done it like that before, but they are wrapped very, very tight to be able to kind of contain and stay close, because a lot of them, I don't like using the word jittery, but they often were jittery. And sometimes the foster care parents will have to be trained in how to properly swaddle, right? To help soothe them. It was definitely, I will say this, I only stayed in child protective services in that position for a year. And I can tell you that is high burnout. Because some of the things that you see, you no longer think as a professional or a therapist. And I was only think of being a mom, and I would start associating negative thinking or about individuals that abuse and neglect. And I felt at that time it was the perfect time to transition on. You too, Ms. Bailey. How long did you stay?
Well, mine was a little different. I wasn't in protective services, but my agency at the time had a grant to work with we had, like, we call it the reunification program. And so it was actually, they were working with the city of Norfolk and helping them reunite families. And so some of it I was doing as a directly with families, and sometimes I was doing it like as a supervisor of other clinicians who were working with those families to help them to understand. But, you know, teaching somebody to have that, what it means to connect and bond when they didn't have it, it's like speaking Chinese. It's really difficult. And if they're wanting it, they can, and they're really genuinely open to it, then there can be. But it was hard. And I would say it took several years. We worked, I say in the beginning when I did intensive in-home, it was a lot of, we had CSA funding to help like with foster care. And so a lot of the kids that we had that way were often could be, you know, that kind of case where we had to help. And it was high burnout for those who were doing the direct care. And some of them were my clients, and some were just helping them to support the clients, the staff that were doing it.
Yeah, definitely was interesting. I will say I left that position and went to family reunification, which was totally different. And I think that's what got me on the road to wanting to work with adults who were struggling with substance use disorders. I saw one side, and then the other side was, you know, putting the resources available to keep families together. So I felt like I had my Superman cape on at the time, and that was beautiful. I stayed there for about 2-3 years. So definitely very different. But once again, a risk factor when it comes to individuals that may develop and that may genetically or inherently become neurodivergent individuals. So just kind of keep that in mind. It's very good to get that history, how they develop, did they walk on time, did they talk on time? Those are very important things to find out doing an assessment, where you may see some things, but we start asking those questions and may lead you into requesting a psychological evaluation, a neuropsychological evaluation to assess someone who exhibits. So just think, I think I said earlier, everything, you know, can kind of look as if it's normal, but when you start kind of just picking up and recognizing them in the session and different things you see, and then what the parent comes with as well, their information, very important that you get a behavior checklist in the very beginning when you're starting with individuals, just to kind of see some of the history or currently what's going on. Next thing could be a risk factors, developmental delays or neurological disorders. So you may have someone that has difficulty in their language when it comes to developmental delays. You may have with neurological disorders, we're talking about someone with learning disabilities, brain tumors. I think someone had asked me about traumatic brain injury earlier, cerebral palsy. Of course, autism is in there, epilepsy. So there was an I don't think it's in your case study, but definitely make sure you find out if your individual that you're getting ready to see or coming to if they have a seizure disorder. You want to be prepared for your session. Sometimes people don't always disclose all health problems. So just make sure it's very, very important that your intake process gathers as much information as you can. Anything in regards to questions on risk factor of trauma and sensory, anything that I missed or anything that anybody wants to share. You may have someone, when I think of risk factor for sensory, they may have a high tolerance for pain and may not recognize that they're putting themselves in danger. I remember a case in which with CPS in which it was alleged that mom had left a child unsupervised and he had burned his hand very badly. And then through the investigation, yes, he was burned. It was not a lack of mom supervision, but he had been burned, but never said anything to his parent because he didn't recognize it was painful. So just kind of that is another condition in which, that pertains to sensory. So just make for sure someone that you are aware of that and you are taking that into consideration. I'm trying to think another one increases someone exposure when I think of sensitivity to lights.
Right.
Go Miss Bailey.
So usually I ask when I am just getting to know someone is like where you see sensory issues, which I typically, like with my lighting in my room, I can switch it out when I'm in person so that they can, what's comfortable for them. And because sometimes that bright light can be a difficulty. I usually ask if they're children, I ask them. And then if they're adults, I'll ask, well, when you were kids and you were in school, what was the lunchroom like? Because the lunchroom is like the worst, the most loud, those tall ceilings typically are really a challenge. And just how do you manage going into certain places? I have somebody who has what is called sensory, it's called autistic catatonia. And she explained that when she's an occupational therapist, so she was able to explain that when she went into Walmart, because of the sensory experience of the noise and the lights, that her system shut down, and she has to just kind of be aware of that, and that sometimes if she isn't wearing her noise cancellation headphones, that she can't see very well, so that her sight goes. So I always ask those questions because sometimes people, it's easy for them to not be aware, or even just their, like you were saying, someone said earlier about their interoception, that their ability to understand what's going on in their body, because if they don't understand, I haven't eaten. I ask my clients, one of my clients particularly regularly, because she doesn't like it. She doesn't have the sensation as we would want her to have. And so she has to remember. So those are kind of things and just even like if there's bruises, it could be, there could be proprioception issues of just, do I understand how my body works in the world? And then that makes, if I don't, I have a good one, then I want to sit in the corner because I don't want to hit myself. This feels very awkward to move my hands around, etc.
Yeah. I'm gonna take some time. I'm hoping to kind of gather some pictures of my play therapy room, so I can kind of show you all at the very end. Just give you just some experiences. Some of you may already have a play therapy room. I know when I first started off with one of the companies I work with, advocating for a room was hard. So I did have a space. So in my play therapy room, I do sand tray as well, but I also have a smaller sand tray that interns and someone else can use if I'm in my office. So I'm gonna try and gather those pictures to see if I can't just show them kind of closer to the end after we do case studies. One of the other sensory things I think about is someone having difficulty with tags in their clothing. That can be something definitely. I remember one time that we were painting. I like to do expressive arts too. And I had put on a t-shirt so they would not get their clothing messed up. And it had a tag on it. And I was like, after I did, I was like, girl, what did you just do? So just you're not even being cognizant of what's going on, but just you can't, cross every T and dot every I, but try and come as close as you can when you're working with an individual where that can exacerbate their experience with you. Trying to think what else. I like what you said, Ms. Bailey, about the headphones. Noise canceling headphones are very important for someone who has difficulty with loud noise, sometimes even small, subtle things. Can anybody think of anything else that I've missed when it comes to sensory?
I was just thinking about because I'm in a school setting, if you know that there's going to be a loud fire drill or an alarm going on, sometimes children respond, negatively to that.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, sometimes I think school personnel does know when they are planning a drill for that day. Okay. So knowing that ahead of time, I think that comes with advocacy too.
Sure.
Doing that part. I think one time I was helping with a parent. She was trying to get accommodations for her son, where someone had mentioned about the cafeteria being a loud room. And I know lunch for some teachers are just them being one with themselves. And we were able to get him not permission, but an accommodation where he did not eat lunch in the lunchroom. He ate it in the classroom. So that was very good. So that comes and, just kind of, and people often think, well, how can it be a risk factor of increasing substance use disorder? But, if I'm in an environment where I'm not comfortable or, and I don't want to feel it, we all know the number one reason that I found with my experience working with people, individuals with substance use disorder, is they want to numb. That's what they want to do. They want to numb what they're feeling. And it doesn't matter what that is. And it is a very high incidence that with neurodivergent individuals, they are prescribed something for anxiety, depression, depending on, especially anxiety. We're talking about, I call them benzos. They are prescribed something that can be highly addictive. So what am I going to do? I know something that helps me and I am going to abuse that because I have access to it. Or individuals in which they may not be prescribed it, but my parent is. So we don't want to lock your file cabinet, right? But you should be aware of where your medicine is. You should be. So those are just some things that can increase the risk of the misuse of and abuse of drugs and alcohol. Okay. All right. I am going to go beyond this, keep us on schedule. All right. So neurological factors, I'm talking about exposure to neurotoxin, insecticides, herbicides, fungicides, or other such harmful chemicals, exposure to well water, having a family history of Parkinson's disease, living in a rural area and possessing certain genetic mutations. There's a lot of medical research now that are geared towards genes and recognizing chromosomes and those things that increase your risk and probability, not just with neurodivergence, but of cancer and other health concerns or chronic health conditions. There is a high prevalence rate of African Americans having high blood pressure and high cholesterol. So there are some cultural things that happen that exist in certain ethnicities. So just be mindful of that when you're coming up with what were some of the risk factors of this individual developing a substance use disorder. I often think of, there was a big push of lead paint. Something that they did not include here. Is there anything neurological that anyone identifies with that I did not, or have experience or a case in which that became to be a factor? All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about intellectual disabilities, which kind of covers the gamut of some of the things that we're talking about that's considered to be neurodivergence. Genetic conditions, sometimes an intellectual disability is caused by abnormal genes inherited from parents, errors when genes combine, or other reasons. Diseases are toxic exposure and complications during pregnancy and or birth. I think often during birth, sometimes the umbilical cord being wrapped around some area where it stopped the blood flow. Anything else, and a direct result, someone develops intellectual disability or some type of delay, developmental delay. Anyone think of anything else that I have not mentioned? Let's see. All right. So I just wanted to kind of go into the definition of trauma, results from exposure to an incident or series of events that are emotionally disturbing or life-threatening with lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning, mental, physical, social, emotional, and or spiritual well-being. We all know there are three types: acute, chronic, and complex. Multiple traumatic events, often an invasive interpersonal nature. I often think about, I think I mentioned earlier, I work with a lot of individuals who are in impoverished areas, and often the experience that I hear often is there was a shooting in my community, and there's been about 2 or 3 in the past week, and incidents in which they have seen bodies. So that can definitely increase the risk of individuals developing a substance use disorder. Neurodiversity and trauma. Trauma occurs in response to events where an individual feels unsafe, threatened, or distressed. Extreme events, death, serious injury, war, or natural disasters. And then I just kind of listed, I did want to kind of go through and list some of what we consider to be big T's of trauma. Accidents, injuries, assaults, war, natural disasters, sexual assault, and bereavement. Can anyone tell me what they believe some of the small T traumas are before I put them up? Someone can just call out a few.
Social exclusion with the peer group, like bullying and stuff like that, and divorce in the family. Moving.
Yeah. Yes. Definitely. When I start, one of the things I don't think I cover in here is, well, when it comes to grief, I'll often think about people always, there has been a tendency for individuals to think about grief only when you're losing someone. But grief can also happen. The change of a job, like she just said, moving, just something different of the norm. And then the biggest thing is that how it has impacted you mentally, socially, spiritually, physically, and impacts your well-being, where it just feels to be a traumatic experience. So kind of just being left out, academic struggles, being treated differently, sensory trauma triggered when misunderstood. So just kind of be mindful. I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms. Baylor.
Really even being traumatized or disciplined because you're either misunderstood that before you're diagnosed or afterwards, to be that you're supposed to like fit into a neurotypical norm, And it's not that it's not an issue of discipline, it's an issue of, that it's not how their brain works. But yet it still is traumatic when, somebody is misunderstanding you or saying, you must fit into this circle, you must fit into what we want you to be. And it affects how they view the world and, their anxiety.
Yeah. I was thinking about also, there's a peer group that I belong to. Something happens, I'm no longer able to be in that peer group anymore. I'm isolated, and I'm alone, right? That can be especially if I'm seeing this peer group still operating together and I'm now not a part of that. So Kathy had mentioned when we were talking about risk factors, exposure to drugs can lead to permanent change to neurological functioning, like drug laced with another substance. You are so right. I remember in high school, there was an individual that got exposed to some angel dust is bad, period. But and he was never the same. He was a star football player, very popular in school. And he was not the same. And his gait was even kind of different. He definitely physically, you could see it had impacted him. His language was very you are definitely right about that, Kathy. It definitely can result in permanent change to your neurological functioning. In utero exposure, yeah, okay. All right. So let's kind of neurodiversity. Okay, so let's kind of go for just kind of get out of this learning objectives. I did want to kind of just share a little research with you. Many researchers believe that substance abuse and addiction amongst autistic people will scare stereotypes about autistic people being rule-driven, rigid, and socially avoidant, plus a narrative around autism that centers children have contributed to the perception that autistic people are less vulnerable to addiction. Define common groups that are considered non-divergent. So what I love about this picture when it was found is, of course, this is a picture of the brain, but remember the premise of neurodiversity is brains are wired differently. So I thought that was kind of cool when I saw this, because it's very different, but doesn't mean that we are quote, quote, different. It's just in the way in which we process individually. And it's interesting because I often think about the personality test that they have. You end up finding out I'm an A type, and isn't that different? Isn't that different in the way that we view things? How we, am I intellectual? Or am I the individual person where I gotta have fun first, and then I think about being smart later? So just kind of naturally, just who we are. So I just you all have a copy of the PowerPoint. So you can definitely view this research yourself, but basically at the end of the day, autistic individuals might be more likely to misuse substances, and the interpretation is autistic individuals might be less likely than non-autistic individuals to report engaging in substance misuse. They also report using drugs to self-medicate. And clinicians at the end of the day, Pete, should be aware of the vulnerability linked to substance use among autistic patients and should work to effectively manage autistic and comorbid symptoms. Is once again, I go back to often person-centered, individualized approach. You may have two clients that are 16 years old and may be socially, economic in the same status, but may have two totally different things they may be vulnerable to. So just making sure that you recognize that. So just kind of remember, make sure you provide additional support to prevent self-medication of possible substance misuse. I mentioned earlier about individuals that may be prescribed benzos. So I'm talking about Adderall, Ritalin, those type of medications. You definitely be mindful of how they are administering that. What I do know about teenagers is normally they are taking it on their own. And if you start seeing some behavior that is not the norm of your child, or even if a client is coming in and you notice a difference, but the parent hasn't noticed a difference, that's really for you to sit down and have a conversation with the parents, just saying what you see differently. So just kind of make sure of that. I don't think there's anything. I'm going to let you kind of review the research. One of the things, make sure you highlight, one of the things to highlight when you go in your case studies, you may find that someone needs a psychiatric evaluation. I tell people I am not for or against. It's individualized on what the parent and the child kind of feel that need for them. Here is another poll. If we can do this poll quickly. Neurodivergent individuals experience and interact with and interpret the world in unique ways. This concept can help reduce stigma around learning and thinking differences. Question number 2, neurodiversity helps reduce problems resulting in untold social, emotional, and behavior problems that in many cases can last a lifetime. True or false? Mm-hmm. All right. So most of you, 100% of you true. All right. And then 75% of you, yes, true. So when I look at this question, neurodiversity helps reduce problems resulting in untold. I think it's something people assumed, especially with Dylan, that him being more vocal and talking about what his experience is was in a sense relieving some of the things that he felt about himself negatively, but not every story and to me was told. So I think having that neurodivergence concept or that you think about can definitely resolve some things that you may not be telling about your experiences or your problems. So thank you all for your input. So I'm going to stop sharing. All right. This just talks about the importance to support neurodiversity, which kind of result of that poll. Celebrating neurodiversity can foster creativity and innovation by encouraging different ways of thinking and problem solving. Neurodivergent individuals often have a different perspective on the world and can approach problems in ways that others may not even consider. It describes a wide range of functioning that exists among humans in many ways. Human brains differ from each other. And while people with differences have been seen and treated as lesser than, we need to just be mindful of the stigma that comes with individuals that we're working with. All right, so we're gonna go into strategies on working with neurodivergent youth, which is gonna help you with your case studies. So I've talked and preached a lot about an individualized approach. Each individual is unique and requires an individualized approach to understand their strengths, challenges, learning style, and communication preferences. Work with individuals to understand their needs and adjust your approach accordingly. A treatment plan should not stay the same. It should always evolve and change just like we do. Make sure you're clear and concise with your language. Avoid using slang or abstract concepts that may be difficult to understand. I think earlier when we talked about some of the answers that came with addiction, some of those big words, denial, enabler, they may not even understand that concept. So you do have to be very clear. I'm not I'm not stating speak slang, but I am stating to communicate in a way in which the individual understands. Positive reinforcement, I can't speak enough on that. It is a good motivator, recognizing the strengths, efforts, and achievements, no matter how small they may seem. Offer praise, encouragement, and rewards to reinforce positive behavior and learning. So I stopped asking the question, where do you see yourself in 3 years and 5 years? And the reason why is I truly believe you have to have small successes in order to look at the possibility of having something great and grand. So it very well may be, I just want you to make it to the next appointment. So just make sure that it is small and measurable, and make sure a lot of more positive enforcement in small increments tends to reap better reward. Visual aids, definitely use diagrams, pictures, or videos. I truly believe in bibliotherapy. There is a television in my play therapy room. Sometimes, you know, they need to see it, or I need to show how to create it. So just make sure that you understand that they may have difficulty with complex concepts. So just make it very, very small. Sensory considerations. Some individuals may be sensitive to certain sensory stimuli, such as noise, light, touch, or smell. So I think that's something Ms. Bailey spoke of earlier, being mindful of light, touch, certain smells. Be mindful of their sensory needs and adjust the environment accordingly. Offer sensory breaks, headphones, or other sensory tools to help them regulate their sensory input. All right, so wanted to introduce a couple of assessment tools to you that you can use. The SASE, the drug abuse screening test, craft screening tool. Make sure you just kind of review it in the PowerPoint. A lot of these assessment tools are on the National Institute for Drug Abuse. That is in the references at the end of the PowerPoint. Audit, I think that's probably one that's more prevalent that I've used in the past. I use the SASE currently. I use something called the Addiction Severity Index as well. Keep all of those tools regarding assessing substance use disorders. We all know Dr. Reed had shared the ADOS. When you're screening for someone for on the spectrum, or just kind of see what neurological condition they may have or developmental delays, you can get a lot of information from that. Social responsiveness scale 2 is a parent or teacher reported measure that has been shown to identify the presence and severity of social impairment and to distinguish autism from other disorders. That is a tool that's very helpful as well. Interventions, EMDR, play therapy, advocacy, neurodiversity, affirming therapy, parent education, IEPs, ISPs, neurodivergence and adoption, and neuropsychological evaluations that can only be done by a neuropsychologist. Make sure you keep in mind on how do you advocate for neurodivergent clients. There are some evidence-based programs for social skills training for individuals with autism. I will share that with you after our case studies. So I'm gonna do a little short. So there's a difference between assessments that provide you with always, likely, and then there's some that provide you with numbers. So I'm gonna play a brief video for you to determine which one you would prefer to use. Always do your research on the assessment tools that you're using. If you can get a guide to that as well, that would be great. I use the SASE, so I follow that guide to the T. So just make sure you're using evidence-based assessment tools. All right, so I'm just gonna how to choose the right the assessment tool that's right for your practice. So I'm just going to pray this briefly. All right.
So I think screening adolescents for substance use disorder is very important, and also pediatric primary care providers have a great opportunity to do this because parents bring their adolescents or preteens into the clinic because they need the physicals before they have sports activities coming up, or sometimes even before they send them off to college. So that's a great opportunity to do what we call universal screening. So you don't target any particular individual, everybody who comes in there. The other reason that you may want to screen is that there are certain reasons why substance abuse occurs at a higher incidence. In targeted populations, you would only administer to people that you would consider at high risk. So these would be those with prior diagnosis of ADHD, depression, maybe those that may have been to a dentist and gotten prescription opioids, accidents, sexually transmitted disease, or even pregnancy. These individuals will be more vulnerable, and therefore you may get a higher screen positive rate if you were to administer screens to those individuals. So there are two tools that are validated that are available on the NIDA-Med website. The first tool is the BSTAD, which stands for Brief Screening for Tobacco, Alcohol, and Drugs. That tool asks for the past year use of tobacco, alcohol, prescription medications, and other drugs. The second tool is the S2BI, which stands for Screening to Brief Intervention. This tool as well, similarly, asks for past year use of tobacco, alcohol, prescription medications, and other substances. So you might ask what's different. So really the way that they differ is in the responses. BSTAD asks for number of days of use in the past year, so one would respond from anywhere from 0 to 365, whereas the S2BI has a gradient response where you respond either never, once or twice, monthly, weekly, daily, etc. How does one decide on which tool to select? My first response would be to say it would be very important to select an empirically validated tool. So we have now these two tools that have been empirically validated in pediatric primary care settings, and therefore these would be recommendations. And the selection would be based on the provider's preference. Some people may like to have a numeric value in terms of responses, and others may like to have a much more tangible response saying, I use it monthly, or I use it weekly, where it actually lends itself to a communication and a conversation thereafter. So one of the advantages of these two screening tools, the S2BI and the BSTAD, is that they've been validated for both self-administration by the individual, the youth in this particular case. So it can be done in the form of a tablet or a paper, or a computer in the waiting room. Or the clinician, if they prefer to do it, administer it this way, have a nurse practitioner or an LPN do it while they're checking vitals and ask these questions. Confidentiality issues are paramount. First of all, I would say providers need to check with their local and state rules about confidentiality because it varies from region to region. Generally speaking, adolescents are going to be somewhat insecure, not knowing what's going to be revealed to their caregivers, parents, family members, etc. So when screening, it's also important to give them the opportunity to respond to the questions in a private manner so that their parents are not looking over their shoulders. But more importantly, when the provider sits with the individual to review the screening results or the assessment results, I think there needs to be some conversations about in what situations would the adolescent's responses be shared with the parents and when would it not be shared. And there are some state rules where the confidentiality rules don't apply, and that's usually when they're a danger to themselves or others. There are several resources available on the NIDA-Med website. We have a chart that offers a list of validated screening tools for adolescents. over and beyond that, there's also opportunities for providers to direct the teens to the NIDA Teen website. There's also materials available for parents who have lots of questions regarding this. Another resource I would probably also recommend is the Monitoring the Future, and this is particularly important to providers because one of the process of engaging an individual into changing their use behaviors is to help them understand how infrequent substance abuse is in that probably age group. Because most individuals or teenagers who are using substances are of the opinion that everybody in their class is using drugs, and that is really not the case.
Ms. Boone, you want to click on to the left-hand side. It'll move to the next slide. Come down, yeah, click right there.
Oh, so you may want to unmute yourself if you're going to talk.
Yeah, I believe if you click over that area, you should be able to move to the next slide.
All right, so Elaine or Janet? Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. What are you looking for?
Okay, so case studies. Perfect time for them to go into their groups.
All right.
And then I am going to tell me how this works.
I dropped a PDF into the chat.
Okay.
All of you, you know who you are. You're the people there in the Zoom boxes. Go ahead and download that. That PDF has all 3 case studies. You're not doing 3 case studies right now. You're going to do 1. So in a minute, as soon as I open up the rooms, you will be automatically whisked away to a room, and the name of your room is the case study that you're going to be working on.
All right. So these are your directions. You have about 15 minutes. Yeah, you have about 15 minutes. You are going to be provided with the case study. And what I would like to know is what assessment tools you would use for that case study. What you would notice is that there already has been a diagnosis that's put at the top. I still want you to kind of give me the tools that you would have used for that diagnosis. Then I want you to tell me what would be some of the challenges working with this individual. And then what interventions, support, and resources that you will provide. So first, the assessment tools. What will be some of the challenges working with this individual? And thirdly, what will be some of the interventions, strategies, supports, or resources you will provide to this individual and their family? Who is the recorder for Sarah?
That would be me. I'm typing, but I can talk through it if you'd rather me talk through it.
You can do that. You can talk through it as you're typing.
Okay, so we picked 4 assessments because Sarah has kind of 4 presenting issues. She's dealing with ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, substance use disorder, and has a history of trauma. So we opted for, assuming that we have a psychologist on staff who is certified with all of these, that she would be given a battery of tests, SASE for her SUD, Connors for ADHD, ADOS-2 for ASD, and then we would also do the trauma symptoms checklist for children. We then talked about challenges that she would face. I can't type all these up. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Just talk. Just talk.
Because Sarah deals with a lot of shyness, she could be difficult to engage. She also has some communication difficulties, and so that would be that could prevent some difficulties in a traditional setting. She is also demonstrates some sensitivities to various sensory things, and she has a history of eloping from settings that she was not happy in. Because of that, we need to provide supports. So that's our 3rd section. We need to provide a flexible therapeutic environment to help with communication, her communication difficulties, as well as her sensitivities. And that might be something that includes non-traditional therapy types like art or music or a variety of different things to keep her connected and able to get kind of past some of those challenges. We'll also need to offer breaks when she needs to, so she doesn't get overwhelmed, and also provide parent training so that the parents can continue the work when we're not with her. Parent management training for cueing and for kind of reminding her of the things she's learned. Finally, the interventions we would work on would be safety planning to deal with her eloping and to deal with sort of risk management, psycho-ed because it sounds like she's using substances to cope and to self-medicate. So some psycho-ed on the dangers and effects of substances, skills training for where she is showing some deficits in skills, both in coping and in social life. Role playing, both for those skills, but also for situations where she's struggling socially or when she's overwhelmed, role play those situations so that she's not as triggered. Medication management for her kind of comorbid anxiety and depressive symptoms, as well as the emotional symptoms from her trauma. And then kind of those are sort of like necessary. And then the optional things would be group offerings, both therapeutic groups and interests groups. So like connecting her either to therapy groups in our practice or interest groups in the community. And then also bibliotherapy or video or app options.
I like that.
Both skills building and substance use relapse prevention.
So
Sorry,
there
I couldn't type
is
all that up.
no, that is okay. So there is a evidence-based program called Peers. So when you get an opportunity, research that. That is a social skills training curriculum. So it is evidence-based. It would be something, even if it wasn't in your community, depending on your location, it might be something that you would be interested in doing in your own practice or in your agency. So that's just a resource. It's available. So
what is it called again?
Peers, Peers. I will put it in the chat. I'll put it in the chat for you. The email address you can go to look it up. So that is very resourceful. So you all had hit it on the nail. Social skills, role playing. With her trauma and her age, how do you all feel about EMDR?
It probably would be very helpful.
Yeah,
it didn't come up in our conversation though.
Yeah, we
okay.
didn't get there.
Yeah. So just kind of consider. I know if anyone in your agency has someone who is specialized in that area, just make sure on hand, if you work with an individual, you have practitioners in your area that offer that. Okay. All right. Can we go to Emily?
Hi, I'm the reporter for Emily. I think I added everything in there for the assessment tools, ADLs, the audit, adolescent SASE.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about a specific tool for trauma, but we thought about it at the end just because she has her main support person is leaving the household. We're unsure of how that was going to affect her. We also want to add in an anxiety scale as she does suffer from anxiety. So some challenges were the communication aspect, the anxiety, interpersonal challenges, substance use, and her main support person leaving. Resources that were mentioned were NA, AA, Al-Anon for the family and the individual herself, a psych eval, SEG, MH eval, and the correct diagnoses, potential ABA family therapy in home, potential day program, medication management, school involvement, especially with the social worker and for any school accommodations that were needed, and peer mentoring. And I think that's it. So if
I
anyone,
like that. I like the peer mentoring. So for anyone in any locality can kind of speak up. In your community, do you have peer mentoring or agency that you can consult with, or if your agency has that? Does anyone up here have any experience with that? Yeah, it's
my teens. Sorry, I
go ahead. I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
Who have a major substance use, we do have peer mentoring. And they do end up working really well, especially when a lot of, at least some of the girls that I've worked with who've had trauma, that's been a really good support for them. And even our support people sometimes have gone into the detention center to kind of initiate that before release. So it's been a really great experience.
Okay. I recently added peer support for substance use disorder to my practice. So we have it twice a week. Right now, currently, it's only for adults. I want to kind of see just what that would look like. Often I will start off with adults. Kids are just, they're a whole nother, what I call beast. You want to make sure that for them, it is consistent, right? You don't want to start something and then it doesn't work out. You want to make sure you have a system in place that can keep it going, because a lot of them have experienced such loss. Thank you for that. All right, and our last one is Alex.
Hi, my name is Julia. I'm reporting for Alex. It's probably going to sound like a stream of consciousness, but we'll go for it. So first thing we started looking at for Alex were just like barriers for him, just because he's 16, 17 in there, and you know, just from the school point of view, you know, and then it got us sort of talking about like hormonal changes, especially in males on the spectrum, and how that sort of impacts their, you know, behaviors. And sometimes near the end, like 17, 18, it can be really helpful because the hormone level does really change again, and sort of like cool individuals down. But before then, it's like 9, 10, 11 that there's usually an increase in behavioral difficulty. And just sort of curious, like for Alex, like how that impacted him. You know, in terms of treatment and need for reassessment, when we saw that little blurb on the case study, we weren't quite sure, and this might be a question for you, Ms. Boone. When someone comes in with a well-established diagnosis, right, there is a blurb about, you know, reviewing that diagnosis again. Is there, can you like explain that, like when that would need to come up?
So I can only say, I think, so he was diagnosed early at age of 4, and then ADHD at the age of 8. I would say in this particular instance, I probably would ask for another, because so much time has expired and the needs may be different compared to when they were before. And the fact that now you have substance use disorder in place, I would just say if anyone who had the diagnosis early at age, and then now there's been a shift, even if it's from a standpoint of environmental, right? And then there have been some other experiences, I think you all mentioned as well, like going through that puberty and just all of those things. I definitely would recommend that for him, because he had it such at an early age. And I'm pretty sure his needs are different, how he functions is different. Especially we're talking about remember we talked about earlier about the emotional, physical, functional characteristics that definitely may have changed, because he's probably, if he's been in other programs, he's learned and pick up some things along the way. So I would say just when there's been such a change in an early on diagnosis, I definitely would recommend it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, thank you. It was just like reading, I was like, oh, I don't know. So thank you for the clarification. All the other thing that really sort of encapsulated what we talked about was just really the motivational interviewing approach, because again, we don't know exactly what level Alex is at, but like determining like if he has motivation to change, like to what extent, you know, is his substance use impacting him, and just looking at that, and also looking at the family's sort of role throughout his treatment as well. And just taking note of like, okay, if he was diagnosed at 4, like what's going on? Because I've spoken from my previous experience of like having a client that, you know, in-home was recommended and then in-home wasn't completed for whatever reason, and that wasn't documented. So really getting that true assessment of all the interventions that have been used and the family's role in aiding Alex is very important as well, and their current level of that, right? Some families get a little sleepy after dealing with the childhood of this sort of stuff. So just sort of getting a sense of what's going on there. Someone also brought up sensory integration therapy. And we sort of talked about the range of that, because that also was listed on the PowerPoint there. And you know, just sort of the range. So you were talking about that one client that you had that, you know, she was in high school, but there was a blanket in her backpack, and that was a thing that was like sort of grounding and help with emotional distress. Or it could be in another, you know, sort of, you know, part of the continuum where they do like yoga and do more meditative stuff and just sort of have that sort of a thing. And you know, at the other end of the spectrum. So it was just interesting to sort of reflect upon that. And then last but not least, just like support for the individual. So a peer support group, you know, a group for not only teens, and that was a whole another gap in services, at least that we have in Northern Virginia, is like not having a place for adolescents and teens on the spectrum to sort of come and have a group, let alone teens on the spectrum in a group for substance use. So that would be something that could be beneficial for Alex. Yeah, and that's sort of it.
All right. Well, thank you all for your input. As you can tell, so I just listed some. I didn't exhaust all. And you all added some to, and if you notice, I wasn't very specific in what theory that you would use. I think I am one CBT, but I also do EMDR, I also do play therapy. And I think if you have the experience in your office, I think use that. You know, if you don't have something in place that your population needs, it's really about, for me, researching and seeing if it's something that I want to do myself, or I think pulling out, you know, kind of polling everyone in the office, like, what are some of your strengths, or what's some of the things you want to learn, and, you know, expounding upon that to make your workspace more collaborative. I think is the biggest thing when it comes to working with this population. So I had a few pictures that I just wanted to share before we get off. I don't know if I'm able to do it. It is 12:59, but let me see if I can't open it up. That's the only thing that I want to kind of share before we leave. So if you notice in my play therapy room, remember I talked a lot about sensory. So I just put up this little area in which, depending on my client's sensory concern, or if not, they can kind of play with it to kind of see which one feels more comfortable to them. So that left side, I have, where we set it up, we can write on the wall. If you see the little bunny in the corner, they can write on the wall here, chalk wise. Let me see if I can't pull up another part of the room. So can you all see that as well?
Yes.
All right, so remember I tell you, they have the ability, as you can tell, it's used very frequently, right? Someone came in and put, so it's myself. So I'm the primary clinician in my private practice. I'm the only one that is a registered play therapist. Everyone else motivational interviewing, CBT, my intern, I'm gonna stop sharing. There's a couple more, but I'm sorry, I can't get to them. Oh, I'm sorry, here they are. Let's see, and then we will be done. Any questions that anyone has for me that they can think of? So I am in the Richmond metropolitan area. So I always believe in having some life in your room. If you see my little bong shaker, that's when we're doing music. And then as you can tell, so this was a small collection. I had one that was bigger, and this is why I took down some. Some get overstimulated. So there are moments and times in which there's nothing on this shelf, depending on who is coming into my office. That's just a bigger picture. So this is my dry erase, the television. Those are my supplies I have for art. There is a chair over in the corner. Not that I put people in the corner, but I do believe in individuals being, I wanted something that was on their level. So I took the bottom of the chair off. And then over here, as you can see, my sand tray, books. You can never be too clean. Make sure you have Lysol. Make sure you're cleaning up behind. We do masks. Often masks are, they're given a directive. I do a lot of expressive arts. So that's just a little bit of my room and what that looks like. All right. Any questions for me? And if not, you all have a beautiful afternoon, and I love the time I've spent with you all.